Hello, boys and girls. Welcome back to our lesson on classifying animals. So, yesterday we learned that to classify an animal, scientists called zoologists study the characteristics of an animal and then sort them, group them, or classify them based on those characteristics. And we talked about some of the things they might discuss is, do they lay eggs? Do they breathe with lungs? What is their body covered in? Is it fur or hair or scales? What do they eat? What is their habitat? And we talked about that there were 6 kingdoms that we now use. And we also discussed that so far we've classified a million different kinds of animals, but there's more out there, including some of the new ones that they just discovered in 2017. That was that isopod. So today we're going to talk about another way that we classify animals, and that is by warm-blooded and cold-blooded. So I want you to stop and think about, what do you think that means? Warm-blooded and cold-blooded animals. And have you ever heard that before? And it's okay to say, I have no idea. If you have no idea, make sure you pay even more close attention during this lesson. While we are getting ready, go ahead and grab your Classifying Animals reading packet. We're going to be there on page 1. And at the very bottom, you're going to see our section that says warm-blooded and cold-blooded animals. We're going to read through and talk a little bit about what does it mean to be warm-blooded and cold-blooded. And then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper with that. So let's go ahead and start. One way scientists classify animals is based on how the animals control their body temperature. So warm-blooded and cold-blooded has to do with your body temperature. All animals, no matter what kind, need to keep a constant, that means the same temperature inside their bodies for their bodies to work properly. If an animal gets too hot or too cold, its body will not work the way that it should. An animal may become sick or even die. And I want you to think about that. What happens if you get too hot? Do you want to keep playing? No, you usually want to sit down and cool off. What if you're freezing? You don't want to do a whole lot. You kind of want to wrap up and get yourself warmed up. So the bodies work that way in keeping a constant temperature. The body temperature of animals that are warm-blooded stays the same when it's hot or cold outside. So it doesn't mean you have warm blood. That's not what that means. But it means that your temperature stays the same even though it's hot or cold outside. Warm-blooded animals are able to control their body temperature by making heat within their own body. When warm-blooded animals are in a cold place, they use energy from food they eat to help keep their bodies warm. Some warm-blooded animals shiver to keep warm. When they shiver, their bodies make heat to warm up. So if you're thinking about it, you as humans, yep, we are warm-blooded. Our body temperature inside stays a constant temperature. Now, normal temperature is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and everybody's temperature is a little above or below that by a few degrees, or point even degrees. But even if I go outside and it's 12 degrees outside, my body temperature does not become 12 degrees. I might get cold, but my body is going to do things to keep it the same, like shivering. Shivering is moving your body around, which makes it heat up and stay warm. Warm-blooded animals also have ways to cool their body down when they need to. Some warm-blooded animals, like people, sweat to stay cool. So if I'm overly hot, my body is going to start to sweat, which is going to cool it down. Dogs pant to stay cool. Other warm-blooded animals drink lots of water as a way to cool off. Did you know that cows need to drink almost a bathtub full of water a day? That's a lot of water to drink in a day. So again, warm-blooded animals stay the same temperature and they do things to warm up or cool down. Now, the opposite would be a cold-blooded animal. Again, it doesn't mean their blood is cold. It's just a way to describe them. A cold-blooded animal cannot keep a constant body temperature. Cold-blooded animals do not use energy from their bodies to stay warm or cool. Instead, they use what is around them to keep warm or keep cool. Crocodiles stay in water or mud in order to stay cool on hot days. So that's why you'll see them in the water or they hide down under the mud that's going to keep them nice and cool. But on days when it's cold and they need to warm up, they come up and bask in the sun. And you've probably seen that here in Florida where you've seen alligators and alligators and turtles on the sides of our ponds on days that are cooler. And that's because they're warming their body with the sun so that they can stay a constant temperature. The body temperature of cold-blooded animals changes depending on the outside temperature. So they don't stay 98.6 like you and I. For example, when the sun sets at night and the temperature drops, their bodies are cooler because it's not as warm outside. When the sun is out, however, their bodies soak up the heat and become warmer. So at night, they have a cooler temperature than during the day. Probably the same thing in the summer and the winter. Cold-blooded animals will move around during the day between the shade and the sun to warm up or cool down. So they don't stay in a consistent space. They have to change in order to stay the same. So you would kind of think that warm-blooded animals have warm blood and cold-blooded animals would have cold blood, but that's not what it means. The temperature inside the body of a cold-blooded animal changes according to their surroundings. The temperature inside the body of a warm-blooded animal stays the same all of the time. For example, like we said, our temperature is 98.6. It stays the same or pretty much around the same most of the time. But if we get sick, our body temperature goes up. And that's a way that we know that a person or an animal is sick because it changes when it shouldn't. If you go outside on a winter day, you might feel cold because the outside of your body is cold. But if you were to put your thermometer in your mouth, even though you feel cold, you would still be around the same temperature. Same thing on a summer day. If you go outside and it's hot and you took your temperature, you would still be around 98.6 degrees. Even though if you felt your skin, it might feel hotter. A cold-blooded animal's temperature is never the same. It's not 98.6. Cold-blooded animals become hot when it's hot and cold when it's cold. Cold-blooded animals have to move from place to place to get cooler or warmer. If it is 45 degrees outside, you guessed it, the temperature inside that body of that animal would also be 45 degrees. Think about the water when you go swimming. Water is going to cool down your body temperature. While a cold-blooded animal would never even feel cold in the water because their body temperature would actually adjust to the temperature of the water. So if you've ever jumped in a pool and gone, oh my gosh, it's cold, well, that's because your outside of your body's feeling that. And you're warm-blooded. But if a cold-blooded animal jumps in that pool with you, they wouldn't say it's cold because their body temperature just adjusted. Most of the time, warm-blooded animals don't have to think about regulating our temperature. Sometimes when it's especially hot or cold, we might have to do something like you might put on a sweater or drink some hot cocoa if you want to warm up, or you might have some ice cream or put a fan on you if you want to cool down. Some examples of other animals would be hamsters and whales and ducks. Now, they don't put on sweaters if they're cold. They instead have ways to keep their bodies warm, like fur or feathers or blubber. You're going to watch this video shortly. So today you're going to be answering some questions in our assignment. So what does it mean when we say an animal is cold-blooded and warm-blooded? And then I'm going to have you answer these questions. Let's think about it. On a warm summer day, painted turtles will gather on a long stick out of a river so they can bask in the sun. The sun's warmth will increase the turtle's internal body temperature. What is that an example of? You'll answer that in your assignment today. A walrus's body is large and solid. It has a thick layer of blubber that helps it keep its body temperature constant. What is the walrus an example of? Because an elephant lives in a hot climate, sometimes its body gets too warm. To keep its body temperature constant, extra heat is released from its large, thin ears. Plus, it can use its ears as fan. What is this elephant an example of? In the winter, a bullfrog hibernates to save energy while it sits on the bottom of a cold pond. In spring, when the water warms, the frog's body temperature will warm too, allowing it to become active again. In very dry times, the bullfrog will burrow into the mud to keep from drying out. What is the bullfrog an example of? Next time we come together, we will be talking about vertebrae and invertebrate. Don't forget to complete your assignment and watch your video today.